Hey everybody, Arch here. So I'm going to go over just the knot that I recommend for the r2b2. Special bead requires a special knot, and this is, man, I just love these beads so much. Hard for me not to want one on every single thing that I have, but I did save some for you guys, so those are coming up real soon, tomorrow actually. So for the black. So let's get to it. First part is it's going to be pretty easy, just a simple like this bead, and then we're going to go a little more advanced for the Sabenza here. So bear with me guys, and hopefully I can keep this video relatively interesting for you. All right, so the beads come in a little baggie with a bead, some 275 paracord, and a coin sticker. So first thing I recommend, I'm just going to do two at a time here, not to complicate things, but might as well. First thing I recommend, get this out of here, is de-stress the cord. And this is a huge step. It doesn't seem like it's all that important, but you get about a foot of cord. I try to shoot for just over a foot of cord. You get a foot of cord with basically every I'm pretty sure every pry bar that I make and every bead that I make. So first thing you want to do is de-stress it. So just chop off just whatever you're comfortable with, a small amount, to make sure you actually get all of the melted portion of the bead, or sorry, of the cord off of there. So you can see I just did a little 1/4 inch snip on each one. And all you're gonna do is pull out some of the core of the inner strand. And really all you're doing here is, too much is not good, but pull out some of the inner cord, less than 1 inch for a foot, and chop off a little bit of the outer jacket too, so that your the end is even there. All right, and then I'll do that 2 times because we're doing 2 beads right now. And pull out some, and basically all this is doing is you are making sure that any stress when you're pulling on the bead, it all goes onto the inner strands, and you're not pulling on the outer strands at all. It takes any pressure and stress off of the outer strands. So what that does is it makes it so the inner strands don't ever poke out. Because if you're pulling on the outer strands, they stretch out and you get kind of like holes in the weave there, and then the inner strands can poke out. So this is through many years of lanyard carry and use. So kind of refining the way that I do it over the years. So that's that. And you'll just end up with a little bit of fluff like this, no big deal. Okay, so first we're just going to, in this case, you'll have an extra piece of cord because you got a bead and hopefully a wonderful wraith. Boy, I've just been loving these wraiths. This is the one that I've been carrying in my pocket. I just took my bead off for the purposes of making this video. So this is going to be a simple one. We're just recreating this for this one, okay? So we're going to keep it simple. And so the first thing I recommend, all right, so real quick, what you're doing is we're just making a slip knot. So for all intents and purposes, it's just like this knot you tied when you were a kid, where you're like, oh, look at that magic knot, or whatever. It's a slip knot. The only difference is you can't pull this loop is what's attached to your pry bar and your bead, and you can't pull that through this little knot with this small piece of cord. So I'm going to show you how to tie it appropriately. So what I recommend doing is, so you can save a little bit of your cord for maybe potentially another project, tie a little single overhand just like this at the end, and put your bead on that with the knot side towards the hollow end of the bead. I call it the captive side of the bead. That'll just sit in there nicely while you mess with this side. And now all you're gonna do is, sorry, I've had enough coffee today to kill an elephant, which is just about enough. And I made that a little tight, but we're gonna pull it up through both the bead and the knot that we just tied. And at this point, you want to, in order to keep everything as much cord as you can. Pull it, tighten it from the bottom side here, and you really kind of can't make this knot too tight at this point because again, it's a slip knot. This this side can move in there. Pardon me. So what's cool now is you can get the bead to hold the knot captive like this, and you actually can go ahead and size this while the knot's in place, which is a pretty slick little thing here. Now, I personally like my bead to be or my lanyard to be as short as possible, so that when I pull this out of my pocket, I just grab the bead and I have this ready. So, but I also want it to be able to flow. So I might put this in my pocket and have the bead hanging around the pocket clip like this, depending on how I have this in my pocket. So kind of a happy medium. It can be too short, but it's just I really recommend playing with this. Like, yeah, I really recommend playing and training with your little pry bar here, because you never know when you're gonna have to do some adversarial eyeball cleaning. That's pretty good for me, I would say, this length here. It can flow around this, in this case, a pry bar that I have it on, and it's still nice and short. So I'm gonna go ahead and call that good, and I'm gonna make sure that that knot is very snug and tight, and I'm gonna go ahead and chop it off. Oh, I should say here real quick, when you pull the knot, when you pull this cord up through the knot, make sure that the two tails are right next to each other. You don't want that tail going through like a different part of this bead, or the tail going through a different part of the loops of this overhand knot here. All right, so, and I'm gonna chop it off about a 1/4 inch, maybe just a touch over a 1/4 inch long, something like this. And at this point, you want to be careful not to like go pulling on the knot, because you can pull that cord right out of there. But you want to go ahead and fray this up as much as possible, because we do want these to end up being just one big glob. Take your awesome lighter, or whatever lighter you got, and start melting. Be careful not to melt your bead. Now, I've had actually people go, "You said that Ultim was high heat." Well, fire is 2,000 degrees, and Ultim is high heat. You can autoclave it and stuff. But I want to say that it maxes out at something along 500 degrees, not 2,000 degrees. So let's not melt your bead in this process here, which is kind of tough. Glancing at the camera viewfinder every now and then, so did catch on fire a little bit. I personally like to kind of cook that loop a little bit. See if I can get that to bake into place. Maybe melt to the little bead of melted cord there on top a little bit. But this is pretty much what you want. Something, too much is better than not enough. You don't want to lose your bead, right? You want this to be sturdy, durable, and be able to yank on it. But that's looking pretty good. And then might have to finagle it just a little bit to get it to go in there. Pull the bead down in to be captive. And now you're ready to go with your lanyard bead. All right, so we're gonna set that aside. That's all fine and dandy, and that's your typical setup there for your. And then you have your other 6 inches to be able to use as you will downstream. You could do that again. Say you're like, oh, I wish this was 1/8 of an inch shorter or 1/8 of an inch longer. Well, you can do that with this piece of cord that you have left now. All right, so let's say you have something like this Sebenza that I really struggle with putting. I normally don't like a bead on a Sebenza because I feel like the tip of the knife gets in the way. The bead gets in the way of the tip of the knife, and it just doesn't work out. There's a reason why, CRK's lanyards, when they come to you, it's this super tight, noose that's on there. I may have actually made this glob. Pardon me, guys. Let's try this side. I may have melted that a little too big to get on here, so we'll see if I can get this on there. If not, the little the tiny little hole in the cement can be a little small. All right, so I'm just going to make this a little smaller. Okay, pretty standard operating procedure here. Obviously, you want to, in the case of the Sebenza, you do, unfortunately, or for better or for worse, have to do this with the blade open, because otherwise you're going to be, while you're doing all this, you're going to be, cutting your cord until we get it right. I'm just going to go ahead and make these equal just for grins. We're not going to try to save cord on this one because it's going to be a little more complicated. Now, you could tie your half hitch with it already around the side like this if you wanted to, or you could tie the half hitch and then stick it up through there. It just depends on how you like to do it. There's no wrong way of doing it, but what I would say is go ahead and make it, tight up against the what you're tying it to in this case for what we're doing. Again, in either way, so this first one is not where the bead's going. That's why I already tied it on there. Obviously, if I was tying the bead on there, I would have messed this up, but either way, so tighten this up, tight. Get that strand, get the two strands right next to each other. I'm gonna go off camera so I don't jab myself in the dick with this thing. And then, oops, you can see here, look at that. So I accidentally pulled the strand over. You rat bastard. So you don't really want to do that. You don't really want to do that at all. And also, the reason that I'm going with this bead here in this case is because if you do, say, do just a double-stranded overhand here, it's going to be a pretty big knot. So I like that this ends up small. So this actually, I've never had this happen where the strand moved over like that. So I'm kind of glad that it did. Let's see what happens here. So now they're next to each other again, and I will pull that over again. So you do want this to be as tight as possible up against here, because it's gonna try to loosen on you. All right, so when you're tying this knot here, make this bad boy right up against there. Tight. Like, make it so it's not moving at all. And man, doing this on camera without and risking jabbing myself in the balls is dangerous. Okay, so now we can close the blade because it can't move to get in the way. I mean, it's close though. Look at that. Woo, boy. I tell you what, Chris Reeve, they got some nuts trying to do this like this. But I will say I do like this. I like the way this works better than any other option, because you could do this and only tie it off on one scale if you want. You could do this and tie it off get rid of the pin completely and tie it around through there. There's a lot you can play with doing it this way, with this tightening this knot up against the scale. I feel like this is what I'm liking the most. I've tried all of those methods before doing this video, and this is what I like this because this is more standard operating procedure too. A lot of people are just like not willing to fuck around with their Sebenza, take it apart and take that pin out of there, whatever. So now, obviously, before you do anything else, you need to put your bead in place. I like to personally tie. I actually haven't found that this matters, but I personally like to. We tied that first knot on this side, and this whole side would be now slipping through both knots. I kind of feel comforted by that. I don't know that it's actually helpful, but I kind of like that, to tie the knot on both sides. So this time, just for grins, just to change it up, I'm going to tie the single strand overhand just on one side, and now we're going to run this other side right through here, pull that up next to the other knot. Now this side, this second one, the one you're melting together, they have to be right next to each other. It's not going to work out. It's not going to work out if they're not running right next to each other. So tighten that up. Make this mucho short, please. I like it short. So also, the shorter you make this, I've been playing with this quite a bit. Most of my Sabenzas now have this bead in this configuration. Actually, so do my Stellars. The Stellar from Shirogorov, I like to have a lanyard on that knife in particular. Actually, I like a lanyard on all my Shiros. I don't love a lanyard on every knife, but I did this same setup on that knife, and honestly, by making this whole thing short, you're gonna be able to keep this bead tighter up against the scale. I also thought of, if a person really wanted to just lock this whole thing in, you could like heat up a safety pin or a paper clip or something like that, and just like run that red hot paper clip through this bottom knot, just carefully and cleanly, and you'd melt that whole inner workings up together. Because it's not like there's stress on this. You would just need could be helpful to have something on there to keep it from wiggling around. But again, I've not had any problem with it. So this is good for me. I really like this. A little long maybe, but I think a lot of times people are like, really, you like it that short? You like it that short? So I would even think that a lot of people watching this video would think that this was short, but it's not for me. Not short for me. You can see here though, not enough to be bothered with trying to save any of the cord. So, man, not being bothered with trying to be conservative with cord will go a long way, man, with tying lanyards. I think anybody who's really into lanyards will tell you that. If you're just like stressing over a couple inches of cord here and there every time you tie a lanyard, you're gonna really miss out on having fun with tying lanyards. And we're just gonna kind of try to cleanly as possible while also glancing at the camera to make sure I'm not just wildly off screen. I really like to try to kind of mushroom this out a little bit, as much as I kind of can, while keeping it clean, and melt it together, and maybe melt it a little bit to the knot itself. And if the glob is too big, or if you have too much of a tail that you're trying to melt together here, you might have trouble getting it in the captivated up into the knot, which is part of the biggest point of both of the beads that I make. Well, I guess there's 3 now, but the B01 Mini and the r2b2. But so here's our waist from the project, and we do still have this piece of cord that is usable for another lanyard like this. And I will go ahead and pull this one up into the, get off camera here, pull it up into the bead. And now you got a lanyard on your Sabenza that's not gonna go up into, the tip there. It's close, but it works. So I like this. I feel like this keeps the Sabenza at the ready. I wouldn't do this with all my knives for sure, but yeah, I would do it with 1 or 2. Anyhow, that is our little knot tutorial for the r2b2. Thanks everybody. Enjoy. I think they're amazing.